Hello everyone, my name is Peter, and in today's video we're going to be going over how to make a more advanced piano. In our previous video we made a simple piano which used several sprites to play the notes. These sprites represented each key, but now in this video we're going to make a more advanced piano that only uses one sprite. So how we do this is we use cloning and sprite variables, which we'll get into later. So if you haven't seen last time's video, first we made our costumes, and these were a white key and a black key, which represent the white and black keys on a piano. You only need to make one of each because we'll be duplicating these and basically using them as they go on. So onto the code. First, in order to format this correctly, as you can see, if I quickly go to the piano right here on the right side, it has a certain pattern of white and black keys. So in order to format this by using one sprite only, we have to first set a list and set each value to these certain values here, and I'll explain what that means later. So next, we set a note type, which will keep track of the actual note, and then we'll just set a starting point, which we want our piano to start at. So this is the part where cloning comes in. Basically, when you use this block, create a clone of myself, which you can find in control, it basically just makes a copy of the sprite that you're in. So in this case, we're creating a clone of the piano, or of the certain key of the piano. So once you create a clone of this key, then you can do certain things to that clone and that clone itself. This is how we get certain notes to be, certain keys to be white keys and certain keys to be black keys. But before we get into that, we have to make some variables. So we already went over note type, which is the actual type of note that is, but we also have to make a variable called note. And this note variable is a special thing called a sprite variable, which you can see here. Instead of making a variable for all sprites, you just make a variable for this sprite only, and that's how you make a sprite variable. And what this does is it allows each separate clone to have its own variable. So usually, when you have a sprite and you make a variable for all sprites, it only allows you to change that variable for that single sprite. But this time, since we have a sprite variable, we can see if we show it here, my sprite is called piano. It says piano and then note. So that basically means that variable is for the specific sprite, and this will allow us to actually create a variable that can change for each clone of that sprite. So with that out of the way, we can continue on to our actual main part of our code. So here we have some if-else statements which determine whether the type of note that should be placed. So our list, which is called black keys, is basically compared to note type, and if it is a black key, then it'll go a certain position depending on the sprite you used, and then it'll switch the costume to black key. And then once it does that, it'll set the note to the note type, and what that does is basically, let's say on our first run through, note type is 0, it'll set the note for that specific key to note type, aka 0. So as this continues, it might also be a white key. So if it's a white key, then it checks if there's a black key before the note so that it can position the white key properly, and then it'll switch the costume to white key, go to the back layer so nothing overlaps, and then do the same thing by setting the note to the note type. So it does this 13 times because there's 13 keys on this piano, and after it does that, we can go on to the part where we actually play the notes. And also don't forget to increase the note type variable by 1 each time so you can loop through every single one. So now onto the actual notes and how to play them. So first of all, we need to have a when this sprite clicked block so we know when the sprite is clicked, and since we only have one sprite, we have to account for every single possible note in this one sprite. And we start doing that by importing all the possible notes in this sound section, and you can find them just by choosing a sound here. And once we have all of these, as we explained in last video, since not all the sounds are there, since we have things like sharps and flats, we have to adjust them by a little bit. You can just copy this part. So basically, if the note is 0, that's the first key. If the note is 1, that's the second key. this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. So if you want to have a piano that works like a real one, when you start at 0, you have to play the correct note, and in this case it would be C. And then when you go to 1, that moves to this black key right here, and that plays C sharp, and you do that by setting the pitch effect to 10. Now the next note is D, but since the pitch effect is set to 10, you have to reset it to 0, and then play the D piano note. And this goes on all the way until it reaches the last note on this piano, which is back to C, but this time it's C2 because it's higher. And once you have that, the final product should look something like this. When you click the notes, when you click the keys, each key should play the correct note, like this. And that's it. So if you have any questions or need any suggestions for projects similar to this, don't forget to leave them in the comments. And that's all for this video. See you guys next time.